Okay, so you're here because you want to get your head around complex stuff,
Yeah.
but maybe without wading through tons of jargon, right? You want the core ideas nice and clear.
And that's exactly what we're aiming for today. We're diving into something pretty interesting called the Golden Quill sesh per ankh.
Yeah, it sounds quite grand, doesn't it? And it really is aiming high. We're talking about a modern way to handle agreements, security, blending really old ideas with, well, very new tech.
Right. It draws on ancient trust law principles, but uses things like blockchain. So it's this fusion that makes it stand out.
Exactly. So forget your typical online stamp. This is pitched as a whole digital ecosystem for secure records. It runs through something they call the Golden Quill Settlement and Raise portal.
Okay, so our mission for this deep dive then is to really unpack it. What is this Golden Quill thing? What problems is it trying to fix? How does it supposedly work?
And what services does it offer? Plus, maybe touch on where this historical angle comes from.
Sounds good. So let's start at the beginning. Fundamentally, what is the Golden Quill?
Well, at its core, it's described as an entity offering, believe it or not, 33 core services. That's quite a list.
33. Wow. Like what, for instance?
It covers a lot, like contract creation, getting things notarized, tokenization, creating digital tokens for assets, and even setting up formal trusts.
Okay, so quite broad. But you mentioned something about how they identify themselves.
Right, this is key. They call themselves a sovereign notarial entity.
Sovereign. That immediately raises questions. What does that mean in practice? Not like a standard notary public then.
Definitely not. They explicitly state they operate under private, ecclesiastical, and commercial trust law. So, not under conventional government legal systems.
Okay, so if they're not operating under government law, where does their authority actually come from? That's a big question.
It is, and they're quite specific about it. They argue their authority doesn't come from a state grant, but from their function, their purpose, and the specific jurisdiction of those private and trust laws they operate within.
And what is that core purpose? What's the driving principle?
Their guiding phrase, the thing they seem to hang everything on, is, without proof, there is no protection.
Okay. Proof and protection. That makes sense as a foundation. So this leads us to the problems they're trying to solve. What gaps or issues in, say, traditional legal or commercial systems are they targeting?
Well, they really focus on two main things. A lack of, let's say, absolute permanence and undeniable provability in agreements.
Right, like with paper contracts. They're familiar, but...
But they can be lost, right? Or damaged, maybe even deliberately altered. That leads to disputes. And even standard digital agreements, while convenient, sometimes don't have that rock-solid legal weight or that tamper-proof quality you need for really important stuff.
So there's a vulnerability there in both physical and some digital methods. How does the Golden Quill propose to fix that? What are their solutions?
Okay, so one of their main tools is blockchain-backed notarization.
Blockchain. So using that distributed ledger technology.
Exactly. The idea is that when something is notarized and recorded on a blockchain, it creates this shared transparent record that's incredibly difficult, maybe near impossible, to change secretly, permanent and verifiable.
Okay, that addresses the permanence and tampering issue. What else?
They also use smart contracts. You can think of these as like automated agreements written directly into code.
Self-executing contracts, basically.
Yeah. Once certain pre-agreed conditions are met, say, a payment is confirmed or a deadline passes, the contract automatically carries out the next step. No need for intermediaries, potentially fewer arguments about what was agreed.
Reduces ambiguity and reliance on manual enforcement.
Oh.
Got it. Any other key solutions?
They mentioned something called token-gated vaults. Imagine a super secure digital locker for your important documents.
Right.
But access is controlled by holding a specific digital token, like a unique key. Adds another layer of security and control. And then there's their Raise as a Service platform.
For fundraising.
Yeah, helping companies raise capital anywhere from maybe $1 million up to $50 million or more, they say, with the legal compliance aspects sort of built into the process.
Interesting. So integrating the financial and legal tech.
Right.
Yeah.
They actually have this phrase for it, digital covenant. It's quite evocative. They talk about contracts being sealed with digital wax, notarized under sovereign trust, and stored forever on chain.
Digital covenant. That definitely paints a picture of something intended to be strong and lasting. Okay, let's dig into the legal side a bit more. How do they frame their operational framework, this trust authority and private law engine idea?
They state that their activities are governed by something called an affidavit of commerce. This document is apparently rooted in principles of private law and declarations of truth rather than statutes passed by governments.
So based on sworn statements and agreements within their chosen legal framework. And what about this historical connection they keep mentioning?
Yeah, they lean into that quite heavily. They talk about a blend of symbolic, sacred, and legal lineage, drawing parallels with ancient scribe tradition.
Scribes, like in ancient Egypt.
Exactly. They mention Kemet, which is ancient Egypt, Babylon, and also the Hebraic scroll keepers, those who maintained important religious and legal texts.
So they see themselves as modern digital versions of those ancient trusted record keepers.
That seems to be the idea. They even have this ambitious tagline, a new jurisdiction, a new law, a new light.
That's quite a statement. How does this translate into practical tools? You mentioned an app.
Yeah, they have a DApp, a decentralized application. Through this platform, users can apparently do several things. They can authenticate settlements using things called legal entity identifiers, which are like global business IDs.
Okay, verifying who's involved.
Right. You can also view sealed deals, finalized agreements, and download notarized PDF documents. That's where you'd launch those capital raises we talked about.
With the smart contracts built in.
Yeah, the platform handles embedding those smart contracts to enforce legal conditions and automatically track progress against milestones, things like that.
So the technology isn't just for storage, it's actively managing their agreements too. They also mentioned AI, didn't they?
They did, an AI and something called a smart legal codex. The idea here is to use AI for tasks like document self-auditing, basically having the AI check documents for potential issues or inconsistencies.
And assessing raise potential.
Yeah, scoring the likelihood of a capital raise succeeding, and also using AI for fraud protection, trying to spot red flags. So it's this mix of, ancient concepts of trust and very modern tech like AI and blockchain.
Fascinating blend. Okay, let's get more specific about the services. Those 33 scrolls of service. Can you give us some key examples? What can people actually do with the Golden Quill?
Sure. Well, the list is long, but some core ones include drafting and notarizing private agreements contracts between parties outside the standard system. Also things like sovereign declarations, which sound like formal statements of position or intent under their framework, and creating trust deeds.
Okay, so foundational legal documents. What else?
They also mention handling UCC1 and UCC3 filings. Now, these are typically used in the U.S. commercial system to register and manage security interests in transactions, like loans. So they're offering a way to handle that within their private system.
Interesting. Applying familiar commercial tools in their own context.
Seems like it. They also offer escrow services holding assets neutrally during a transaction and trust administration, managing estates and legacies, maybe for inheritance planning.
And it sounds like they move into more financial instruments, too.
Yeah, things like private bond issuance, creating debt instruments, and authenticating negotiable instruments, which are documents like promissory notes that promise payment. Again, alternatives potentially outside traditional banking.
And the more cutting-edge stuff. Tokenization.
Right. They mention tokenizing real-world assets, turning things like property or maybe even art into digital tokens on a blockchain. And issuing gold-backed stable tokens, digital currency, supposedly backed by physical gold.
So bridging physical assets and digital finance, what about disputes?
They offer blockchain-based arbitration for resolving disagreements, presumably using smart contracts to help enforce the outcomes. And as we said, the capital raise plans that package the tech and the legal framework together.
And the common thread through all 33 services
is that each service, each transaction, is meant to be digitally sealed, notarized under their specific sovereign authority, and then recorded permanently and immutably on the blockchain. That's the consistent theme.
Immutability and their unique authority claim. Got it. Now let's circle back to that historical angle. Why the big emphasis on ancient scribes, calling themselves a sacred guild of notaries descended from the ancient scribe orders?
Well, they explicitly draw that line. They see the ancient scribes in places like Kemet, Babylon, and among the Hebrew scroll keepers as the original trusted parties responsible for documenting critically important information.
Like laws, contracts, religious texts.
Exactly. Royal decrees, land deeds, covenants. The scribes were the ones ensuring accuracy and preservation. The Golden Quill essentially presents itself as the modern successor to that vital role, just using digital tools instead of papyrus or clay tablets.
So it's not just marketing fluff, it's fundamental to their self-conception and presumably their claim to legitimacy.
It seems that way. They frame their work not just as a tech startup, but as a revival, even a resurrection of trust-based law principles adapted for our current digital age.
A resurrection, strong word. Okay, so bring this all together. Who is this really for? Who might find this whole concept valuable?
Well, thinking about it, probably a few different groups could be interested. You've got founders, entrepreneurs, businesses looking to raise money. Maybe they find the integrated tech and legal platform appealing, potentially faster or different than traditional routes.
Right. The raise as a service aspect.
Then you might have legal professionals, lawyers perhaps, who are exploring alternative ways to structure agreements or looking at the potential of blockchain and law. They might be curious about this infrastructure.
Exploring new paradigms.
And then there are likely individuals, or maybe groups, sovereign entities they mention, who perhaps deliberately operate outside conventional government systems. For them, an alternative system for creating trust and enforcing agreements could be very compelling.
People looking for non-state-based solutions for legal and commercial dealings.
Exactly. At the end of the day, their core pitch seems designed to resonate with anyone who values certainty and permanence in agreements. That tagline again, your word becomes law, and your law becomes eternal.
It's definitely aiming for a sense of enduring authority.
It's a really ambitious vision, no doubt. Hopefully, this deep dive has given you a clearer picture of what the Golden Quill sesh per ankh is trying to be this blend of ancient ideas about trust and law with modern blockchain tech.
Yeah, I think for anyone interested in where law, technology, and even ideas about sovereignty might be heading, the Golden Quill certainly offers a unique and pretty provocative model to think about.
Definitely food for thought. And maybe that leaves us with a final question for you to mull over.
Go on.
Just how might technologies like blockchain maybe drawing on these older historical precedents for trust, like the scribes?
Yeah.
How might they fundamentally change our whole understanding of legal authority and agreement making in the future?
It's a big question, and initiatives like this, whether they succeed or not, are certainly pushing us to ask it.